So I was asked to speak specifically in the areas of academic journals and just a little bit about my own experience before I get going. I served as the editor of the Christian Education Journal for 18 years. It's an academic, blind, peer-reviewed journal in the North American context, but we often get articles from different parts of the world. Uh, that was a great learning experience. Up to that point, I had submitted articles to journals, um, but I didn't really understand the inside working of putting together an academic journal. And so I'm going to talk to you both as an author and as an editor of a journal. And later, when we have opportunity for questions, we can explore both sides of issues on both sides of that. Uh, Academic journals and the life of a professor. Journals are important in a number of ways, and it's one of the reasons why it's so important that as a professor, you be thinking about ways of sharing your work through academic journals. Journals are a source of research for the work that we're doing, preparing to teach a course or working on a research project. They are a stimulus to our own learning and thinking. Um, Stumbling upon an article that's very intriguing and it stirs your thinking in new ways, that's an important function of journals. I also like to think of it as a matchmaking service for scholars. That when you find an article in a journal that's related to something you're really interested in, you not only get information, but you also make contact with somebody who shares your same passions and concerns. It's a great way of meeting other scholars, and connecting. Don't be afraid to email authors and talk to them about what you appreciated in their article. Um, it's a great way to connect and make connections with people who can help you continue to grow as a scholar as well. Uh, in a lot of institutions, if you publish an article in a peer-reviewed journal, that is something that counts toward your future promotion. Um, it varies a lot depending on the kind of institution that you're in, but it is important that the leaders of your school are aware of your contributions to journals. And we're going to talk about three different kinds of contributions. The first one, I think it's what most of us think about initially, is developing an article from the research and writing that we've been doing to share in a journal format. And I like to think that it's a way of developing your ideas. Maybe you're not ready to write a book. Maybe what you've been working on, it's premature to think about doing a book. But you can take important pieces of what you've been working on and craft those into articles that make a contribution to your field of study. Uh, for a lot of us, the first place that we turn to for ideas for articles is the dissertation that we did in our doctoral program. And I highly recommend that you take time to think carefully about, are there parts of my dissertation that could be crafted into academic articles that would contribute something in the field of study that I've been focused on. Maybe it's something from the literature review. For some of us, the kind of dissertation we did had empirical research. That's always a good focus for an article. But even if yours is a more conceptual dissertation, there can be important pieces of it that are worth developing to share in an article. You don't have to think only about a book. And often an article can be an important building block in your own thinking as you're working toward developing a book. It's also a place, some of you, once you've been teaching for a number of years, you not only are passing on content from textbooks, but you're also developing your own perspectives and your own connections, ideas. And an article can be a place where you can develop those. It doesn't have to grow out of research that you've done in the past. Maybe these are current things that you're working through, and you want to reflect and interact with a number of sources and take a position, draw some conclusions you think are important for others to consider. So sharing what you've been teaching and how your thinking has been growing as you've been teaching in a particular area. I think one thing I want to emphasize is this kind of work really, to me, is an issue of stewardship. It's not enough for me to learn something because I'm curious. That's not the end result of all that work. I push myself to think about who else might benefit from this, who else might want to hear about this. And then crafting an article for an academic journal becomes a stewardship issue where I'm taking what God has allowed me to learn and I'm now putting it into a form that others can benefit from as well. So I want to encourage you to think about this not just as me trying to get my ideas out, but it really becomes a stewardship issue. What has God allowed you to learn? Who else could you share that with? Before I get into some of the other details of writing and reviewing, I also just want to emphasize working on an article can be a great collaborative project with someone else. I have written books, I've edited books, I've co-authored books, I've co-edited books. I've written articles by myself, and I've written articles with others. I really enjoy the interaction, the stimulus, and the accountability of working on an article with someone else. It could be a colleague at my school. It could be perhaps a classmate I had in my doctoral program, or it can be students that I'm working with, that they can be part of this process. I do want to encourage you to think about this not just as solo work, but as collaborative work. And for me, there is so much enjoyment of the fellowship of doing scholarship together. And I have always enjoyed that more than working on a project all by myself. So that may say more about me than about you, but I do encourage you to think about it. Some things to remember. I'm going to start by talking about writing academic articles and submitting them to journals. Then I'm going to shift and talk about reviewing, being a reviewer of articles that are submitted. And then we'll wrap up with talking about reviewing books. So, writing an article. A few basic things, really important, and I'm surprised how often some people don't take the time they need to do these. Number one is know the audience of the journal. Who is this journal for? Who reads it? What kind of scholars are they? What fields of study? what is the journal trying to accomplish? So you can go to a journal website, you can read about it there, but I also encourage you, make sure you get 2 or 3 back issues of the journal and read the articles that are in it. Get a sense of the kind of work they're interested in publishing. You can craft your article then in light of what you know about the journal and who it's for. And this increases the potential for your article to be accepted. So you need to develop your article with that audience in mind. You have to think about what is important to them. What is it that they're going to be looking for? It impacts the tone of your article, the style of writing, how much referencing, and you have to know what format the referencing needs to be in, and how much of a balance between theory and practice is expected in this journal. Some journals are very content to be very theoretical, just presenting information. Others have a mission or ministry emphasis to them, and so they want to see some implications, some potential contributions to the church as part of that article. So that's an important thing to know. What is this journal looking for? What will the readers be expecting in terms of strictly theoretical versus theory with some practice aspects as well? Make sure every journal has regular guidelines, and make sure that you read those carefully and stick to them. They will address formatting, the length of the article, and any other key components that are important to the journal. So once you craft your article, I encourage you to take an intermediate step before you submit it. Share your article with 2 or 3 colleagues, ask them to read it over, and to give you feedback. That is, it's a good step to help make sure that you're communicating clearly and that you polish this article up before you submit it. If, as an editor, when we would get articles and if there was awkward grammar, if referencing wasn't being done right, it just didn't make that feeling. I knew that there were already some problems. So I do encourage you, get 2 or 3 colleagues to read over, give you feedback, and then polish it up before you send it in. Once you have your article ready, then there's one of 2 ways that things tend to be done. Either there's a website where you can upload your article submission, and they'll give you instructions on how to do that. Some journals aren't that technologically advanced, and instead there's an editor that you are to send an article to. Make sure it's a Word document, send it along with the email, and then craft a short cover letter or cover email where you explain briefly what is the focus of the article and why you see this as relevant, potential for this journal. Simple cover letter. It lets the editor know what is this about, what's the topic, how might it connect with their journal, and then wait for a response. So those are the 2 ways that submissions are being done these days. It's either direct upload on a website or sending it along with an email. Now is the hard part, waiting. When you send something in, here's what the editor has to do. The editor is going to receive it and do an initial screening. Is this the type of article I could see our journal publishing or not? And a lot of the rejections come when the article just isn't, it's not the type of article that they're looking for. As an editor, I would receive dozens of articles where somebody saw this was Christian education, and so they thought this was a place to share a 3-page, here are my reflections on good teaching. Or they would send me something that was strictly for elementary education, which is not the focus of our journal. So when you send it, the editor is going to do an initial screening. Is this the kind of thing we're looking for or not? They're not evaluating the article yet, but they're looking at the topic. They then have to identify and recruit reviewers, and a blind review process. The reviewers won't know that you're the author of this article, and when you get a report back, you won't know who the reviewers were. But that takes time to recruit, send the article off to those reviewers. Generally, they have 4 to 6 weeks to complete the review and send it back. Then the editor has to read through the reviews, compile them, and make a decision, and craft a letter back to you, and then contact you. It can take a few months. It can take up to half a year. Some journals are backlogged, others are quicker. But it is a slow process. So sometimes authors are tempted to submit an article to more than one journal with the idea that if one of them accepts it, I'll withdraw the article from the other journals. Not a good idea. If an editor goes through the work of recruiting reviewers, getting them out, getting the response back, only to have you later say, I'm withdrawing my article, they've gone through a lot of work and they've asked other people to do a lot of work. And your odds of being accepted by them in the future are diminished. Stick to one submission at a time, and then you have to wait for the response. Journals are not interested, editors are not interested in accepting something and publishing it only to find out it also got published somewhere else. So if it's going to be published in another format, you need to make sure that the editor understands that. Or you can say excerpts from this are going to be on this blog site, but we'll also use the blog site to steer people to the journal. Well, that's a great thing. So anyways, patience. This review process takes time. Now, one of two things will happen as a result of the review. Either you'll be told, we're accepting your article, here are some revisions we're asking you to make, and so that's polishing it up or addressing some important questions. Or they may say, I guess there's three things. Accepted, or the reviewers are recommending some revisions and another review. So that's encouraging, but it's saying this isn't quite ready to accept. We'd like to see how you would handle these key pieces. And so you have a chance now to consider what the reviewers have to say, and then do some revision to the article and resubmit. Now, that doesn't mean you have to do every single thing the reviewers identify, but you have to take everything that they have to say seriously and then determine what revisions am I okay doing, or are there things, no, that's not what this article is about, I guess I'm not going to publish it with this journal. So you have some decisions to make in that situation. The third experience, and I've had this experience, where the article is just rejected, where they say, no, this does not fit our needs. But then they share with you the feedback from the reviewers. That is really helpful because as we're growing as writers, that kind of feedback really helps. And I want to encourage you, don't be devastated when an article is rejected. Take it as an opportunity to reflect on the feedback and see how you will do better next time. What is it I need to do differently to make this work? So I think that's the process. That's what I want to say about writing articles for journals. Uh, if something gets accepted, make sure that the leaders of your school know about this and that you're able to share that with those who may have an interest in it. When we get to our question and answer time, I'd like to pick up the issue of journals that charge for your publication. I don't want to try to get into that now. It's quite a discussion, but later we can come back to that. A second way of contributing to journals is the other side of this article process, and that's being a peer reviewer. Now, typically, being a peer reviewer is something you can do once you yourself have some publications. When you have been published, and especially if you've been published in the topic, in the areas that the journal addresses, then they're willing to consider you as a possible peer reviewer. It's a way of guiding others. I think it's a very developmental process. I'm not just the gatekeeper saying yes or no. I'm giving feedback to help a fellow scholar grow in their writing. And so you need to know the journal well. If you're going to be a peer reviewer, you need to make sure you understand the goals, the purposes of this journal, the kinds of articles that they're looking for, and the qualities of a strong article for this journal. So make sure you really understand the journal well. This is not a place or time for you to just display your knowledge as a reviewer. It's a place where you are serving the needs of the journal. So need to know it well. Then review the article in light of the journal audience and the qualities that the journal editor is looking for. So if you're going to be a reviewer, it's very appropriate for you to ask the editor, what are some of the important qualities you want me to evaluate as I'm reviewing this article? Don't assume that you know. Take time to listen to the editor and then make sure those are the things you're attending to. Try to remove yourself from the review process. It's very easy when you're reading an article to say, well, I wouldn't have written it this way. Or, if I was the author, I would have done this. Well, it's not about you. You're evaluating what that author has tried to do, not recraft it or rethink it in terms of what you would have done. So it's not about you and your ideas, but if there's gaps, if there are things that you're familiar with, information relevant to the article that's important and the author has missed it, that's part of the review process. This author is not aware of some other important material. So that's something to recommend. So when you're a reviewer, think carefully about how the topic fits the journal and the audience, the writing level and style fitting the journal, Does the author demonstrate real understanding of the topic, the current conversation and issues? Is the author making a contribution to the conversation, not just rehashing old ideas? This happens occasionally. One of the things I can spot pretty quickly is when a professor somewhere told their master's students, write up this assignment and send it to a journal. More often than not, what I get is a rehash of current knowledge without any real new contribution. So this is a key piece as a reviewer. What's new here? What's the contribution? Is it well developed? Is it well organized? Is it a good argument that they're putting forward? Does it, are appropriate implications that fit the journal being written? Maybe it's a journal that's not looking for implications, then you don't have to worry about it. But as a reviewer, I'm trying to provide constructive feedback to help the person do their best work, even if it doesn't fit this journal. So I can say, no, this article does not fit this journal. But as you continue writing, here are some things that could help you be a stronger writer. This is a great time to invest in helping others grow as writers. Couple other simple things. If you're a reviewer and you're given a deadline to get the review back, get it back by that deadline. Editors really appreciate reviewers who are timely. And it's hard to keep asking you to review things if you are always turning things in late. Make sure you're staying anonymous. If you're inserting comments in an article, make sure that you're not identified somehow. And okay, just one last thing on reviewing. It's good to contact an editor. If you're interested in being a reviewer, contact the editor, send an email, attach your vita or your CV so that they know your background, and give them an idea of the kinds of things that you are well equipped to evaluate. What are your research topics? What are the areas you teach in and have familiarity with the field? So that's an important aspect of getting started. Make contact, see if they're open to having you serve as a reviewer. And then when you're given your first one to review, make sure you do a really good job and get it back on time. And that, editors love people like that, and you'll get their requests. Finally, and I'll do this quick, on reviewing books for journals, it is a great way to begin to write and contribute to the field. Maybe you're feeling, I'm not ready to do an article, I'm not ready to do a book, but I have an area of expertise that I've been developing. I've been studying in this area, and then a new book on that area comes out. You're in a good position to review that book and help others understand what's new. What does it add to the conversation? So again, check journals, look at the kind of book reviews that they do, look at the length of the reviews. Some journals do fairly short book reviews, others are doing much more in-depth analysis. Read several book reviews from that journal to get a sense of the scope and the focus of what they're looking for. Again, send an email to the editor or the book review editor, introduce yourself, again, attach your CV, and share with them the areas of research and writing you've done and the areas of teaching that you do. And maybe a great way to do this is to say, here's this new book in our field. I think it's relevant for the journal. If If this has not already been reviewed by somebody else, I would like to serve as a reviewer. Here's my background. And that way the editor is becomes familiar with a new book, can see if it's relevant, and then knows about you. And if you have the relevant background, they may say, yes, let's have you do that. But make sure you read the guidelines for book reviews as well. Um, when you finish one book review, go ahead and ask them if they have something else that they would like to have reviewed. It's a way of getting started, and often when somebody does a good job with a book review, the editors are very happy to have them do another one. So um, make sure your first ones are really well done. You develop a reputation with the editors that can then help you in the future. One last thought, and then we'll open for some questions. Um, please don't just write for academic journals. I encourage you to keep thinking about other kinds of writing, blogs, magazines, websites that serve the needs of the church. You are not just an academic. You are a Christian who's part of the church, and there are ways that what you've been studying can have a positive impact in the life of the church. I had a colleague wrote a commentary on Matthew, great academic work, then wrote a book on discipleship in Matthew, written for lay people. He was taking all that work he had done on the academic side, and he was thinking about what parts of this are relevant to the life of the church. And he was able to craft something to serve that need. I just want to encourage you to do the same thing. Academic writing is great, great to contribute to your field, but it's also important that you stay attentive to the needs of the church and how what you have been learning can benefit the church, and do right in those ways as well. God bless you as you contribute in your field and to the church.